And we're back on, and we're just waiting for everybody to come up. Your Honor, this is Doug. I'm here. I'm ready when you are.
Great. Thanks, Doug. We can go on the record. We are continuing in the matter of the application of Columbia Gas of Maryland, Inc. for authority to increase its rates and charges. This is a Public Service Commission case number 9664. My name is Christine Burke. I'm the Public Utility Law Judge assigned to hear this case. We're continuing the testimony of Columbia Gas this afternoon. I will turn it over to counsel for Columbia.
Thank you, Your Honor. It's Amy Harakis again, and we would like to call our next witness. That's Jennifer Harding.
Good afternoon, Ms. Harding. Could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Harding. For the record, please state your employer and title.
My employer is NiSource Corporate Services. My title is Director of Income Tax Operations.
And do you have before you your direct testimony dated May 14th, 2021, and your rebuttal testimony dated August 16th, 2021, as well as Exhibit JH-1 and Exhibits 6?
Yes, I do.
And was this testimony prepared by you or under your supervision?
It was.
And do you have any changes, corrections, or updates to the testimony?
I do not.
Is your testimony true and accurate to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief?
Yes, it is.
And if you were giving the same testimony today, would your testimony be the same as when the testimony was originally filed?
Yes, it would be.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I ask that the following documents be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 9. And if you're ready, I will go through the list of documents.
Yes, go ahead.
The direct testimony and rebuttal testimony of Ms. Harding, including accompanying Exhibit JH-1 and Exhibit 6, Supplemental Exhibit 6, Rebuttal Exhibit 6, Surrebuttal Exhibit 6, and Revised Surrebuttal Exhibit 6.
Those will be marked as Columbia's hearing exhibit 9 for identification. Is there any objection to the admission of these documents? OPC?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, those exhibits will be entered into the record as Columbia hearing exhibit 9.
Thank you, Your Honor. Columbia does not have any rejoinder for Ms. Harding, so the witness is available for cross-examination or questions from Your Honor.
Thank you. OPC, do you have any questions for cross-examination for Ms. Harding?
No questions, Your Honor.
Staff?
Yes, staff has some questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Harding.
Good afternoon.
Has President Biden signed an increase to the corporate federal income tax rate into law?
No, he has not.
Is there any tax reform law currently pending in the Maryland General Assembly?
No, not to my knowledge.
On page 3, lines 2 through 5 of your rebuttal testimony, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. You acknowledge that no one can say with any certainty /1 an increase to the federal corporate tax rate will take effect, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The commission has considered tax rate changes outside of a base rate case in the past, correct?
Yes, I believe that they have addressed changes in tax rates outside of normal rate case.
And a change in federal corporate tax rates would likely impact all utilities in Maryland, correct?
Yes, they would impact all companies that are paying corporate income tax rate, corporate income taxes.
And then on page 3, again, of your rebuttal testimony, lines 11 through 12, you explained that the FTRA rider is to function as a temporary mechanism, correct?
Yes, it would be a temporary mechanism as a rider.
And even if the commission were to allow the FTA rider as a temporary mechanism between the time when a future increase or decrease in the federal income tax rate is in effect, commission staff would still have to assess whether a utility's existing rates are just and reasonable under a change in the federal income tax rate, correct?
The rider would include schedules that would represent impacts from the change in the tax rate and would be submitted for commission review. So yes, I would expect that commission would review those schedules based on the change and the direction of the change for that rider.
Okay. And is there anything preventing the company from filing future adjustments or schedules supporting the change in effective base rates due to change in the federal income tax rate outside of a base rate case?
So just to clarify the question, are you asking if there's anything that would restrict us from preparing schedules of impact for tax rate changes outside of a base rate case?
Right. So, if the commission chooses not to adopt, this tariff rider, there's nothing stopping the company from filing this rider outside a base rate case, correct?
Administratively, I'm not certain, but we definitely could put information together to submit of the impact of a tax rate change. So
Okay.
I'm just not aware of the procedural or the procedure to submit it outside of a rate case.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
I just had one question. Ms. Harding, on page 4 of your rebuttal testimony, you compare the FCRA rider to the prior TCJA Act in 2018 and the analysis the commission had to do for each one of the utilities based on the changes made because of that change. Do you recall there being any particular lag time that impacted the company due to the evaluation that needed to be done by the commission?
I don't recall that. I joined the company in January of 2020. So I don't know specifically the lag time submitting the Columbia Gas of Maryland facts for review and approval. But there was a lag, to my understanding, of getting all of the utilities that are impacted approved based on the commission review.
Thank you. Any redirect of Ms. Harding?
No, Your Honor, no redirect. But if I may, would you like us to take your question back and get a definitive response and provide that to you regarding the timing?
I can do it in a formal data request.
Okay, thank you.
I'll follow up. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harding.
Thank you.
Columbia's next witness is prepared.
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my co-counsel, Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Rackus. Your Honor, at this time, the company would call Mr. James Racher to the stand.
Good afternoon, Ms. Racher.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Can you just state your name and spell it for the record?
Sure. It's James F. Racher. That's JAMES-FRACHER.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to note for Your Honor and the parties that the company does have some brief live rejoinder, but first I will go through all of the preliminary questions to with the goal of moving Mr. Racher's testimony and exhibits into the record. Good afternoon, Mr. Racher.
Good afternoon.
You already stated your name for the record, but could you please state your employer and your title as well?
Yes. My employer is NiSource Corporate Services Company, and my title is Manager of Regulatory.
Thank you. And Mr. Racher, do you have before you your direct, supplemental, rebuttal, and surrebuttal testimony in this case?
I do.
Do you also have before you the various attachments and exhibits you also prepared in this matter?
I do.
Okay. Were all of these documents prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
Yes, they were.
At this time, do you have any changes, corrections, or updates to any of those documents?
I do. I'd like to make a correction based on the rate-based change noted by witness Insco earlier today. The new revenue requirement, which would show up on page 1, line 17 of my surrebuttal, would be $5,430,227. And this is a reduction of $26,512 from what was initially in my surrebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Racher. if you were giving the same testimony today and providing all of the same attachments and exhibits with the correction you just stated, would your testimony and all of the exhibits be the same as when they were originally filed?
Yes, they would be.
Your Honor, at this time, I am going to read and try to be as efficient as possible, as Mr. Racher has undoubtedly the most exhibits of any witness in this proceeding. I'm going to just read those into the record and ask that they be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 10. Okay, so I'll start here. I would ask that the direct testimony of Mr. James Racher with attachments JFR1 and JFR2, as well as exhibits 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. The supplemental testimony of Mr. Racher with accompanying attachment JFR1 sup, along with supplemental exhibits 1, 3, 4, 5, 7. The rebuttal testimony of Mr. James Racher with associated attachment JFR1R, along with rebuttal exhibits 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, and the surrebuttal testimony of Mr. Racher, along with surrebuttal attachment JFR1SR, and surrebuttal exhibits 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, as well as revived surrebuttal exhibits 1, 3, and 7. Collectively be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 10.
So marked.
And Your Honor, if there are no objections, I would ask that Columbia Hearing Exhibit 10 be admitted into the record.
OPC?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any objection from staff?
Staff doesn't object. Just a point of clarification, are all the other exhibits being entered as well?
Ms. Garofalo, what other exhibits?
The exhibits to his direct and supplemental rebuttal.
I believe he listed all of the attached exhibits.
It was
there
my
something in particular you didn't hear?
No, I just wanted to know how many sets of accounting exhibits were being entered into evidence.
Well, so the easiest way to think of it as is he had 4 rounds of testimony, and for each one he had an exhibit 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7 that he sponsored for each round.
Yes.
And then, so that's 7 times 4 is 28, plus there were 3 revised exhibits that were in relation to the rate-based change. So I think exhibit-wise, that's 31, but you'd also have to include the attachments. There's a few attachments in there that attach directly to the testimonies as well.
Okay. All
But
right.
they are, and that they are all, it was my intention that everything Mr. Racher sponsored was to get everything he sponsored into the record. But every single thing on the exhibit list that I provided is what I tried to get into the record.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate the indulgences. I know he has quite a few.
Yes. There is quite a bit. If there's no objection, it will be marked and entered into evidence as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 10, and it did include quite a few attachments and revised attachments and exhibits. And did you have rejoinder that you?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I'll ask a few questions of Mr. Racher. Thank you. Mr. Racher, have you read Staff Witness Acosta's direct testimony on page 42 recommending reporting requirements for the company's physical station protection program and its maximum allowable operating pressure station reconfirmation program.
Yes, I have.
And just for everyone's benefit, I'm going to try and say PSPP and MAOP programs so as to avoid the mouthful that is the entire name. In your rebuttal testimony, Mr. Racher, did you refine the company's position with respect to the PSPP and MAOP programs?
Yes, I did. On page 14 of my rebuttal testimony, I explained that the company is withdrawing its request to defer costs related to its PSPP, but still proposing to defer up to $70,000 annually through 2026 for its MAOP program.
And did staff witness Acosta respond to the company's rebuttal position with respect to the company's PSPP and MAOP programs in his surrebuttal testimony?
No, not to my knowledge.
And how does the company further respond to Mr. Acosta's reporting recommendations?
Yes, if the company is granted a deferral for the costs associated with its MAOP program, then the company can agree to Mr. Acosta's reporting recommendations as outlined on page 42 of his direct testimony for its MAOP program. However, without any deferral treatment, the company does not agree to Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements.
Okay, and do you agree with Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements for the company's PSPP program?
No, the company does not agree with Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements for its PSPP program because the company is no longer asking for deferral treatment for its PSPP program.
Okay, so just to recap, you would agree to Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements as stated in his testimony for the company's MAOP program, but not for the PSPP program.
The company would agree to Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements for its MAOP program if the company is granted the deferral treatment for the station MAOP reconfirmation program. The company does not agree to Mr. Acosta's reporting requirements for its PSPP program.
Okay, and so if the company does not agree with Mr. Acosta's reporting recommendations, would the company be willing to agree to any reporting requirements this time, regardless of whether deferral treatment is granted?
Yes, we would.
And what reporting requirements would the company be willing to accept?
Yeah, the company can agree to provide annual status reports on its PSPP program and the MAOP program, which would include current year program progress, future year projections for completed work units, and projected completion dates for the overall programs.
Thank you, Mr. Racher. And Your Honor, at this time, Mr. Racher is available for cross-examination and/or any questions from Your Honor.
Thank you. OPC, do you have cross?
No, Your Honor, thanks.
Staff, cross for Mr. Racher.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Rachel.
Good afternoon.
I'm Annette Garofalo. I don't think we've met before. I'm with commission staff. I'm just going to try to straighten out, I hope you'll forgive me, your exhibits in the sense of what the party should rely on. As we just went through, you did submit accounting exhibits with the application. You submitted supplemental accounting statements. You submitted something similar with your rebuttal testimony. Then there were revised exhibits. Then on September 2nd, there was surrebuttal testimony and revised surrebuttal exhibits. And I believe there was one filed on September 10th that was admitted into evidence. And so what I'm trying to figure out is if you were to testify today and everything verbally that you've testified to was included, what set of exhibits should we rely on for numbers?
Yeah, I realize there have been a lot of updates just due to the way the proceeding has progressed, and the numbers that were provided on Friday, September 10th, would reflect the latest changes, which include those updates for actuals that were done previously this summer, all the way through updates for rate case expense, the rebuttal items. And then this last adjustment was related to Mr. Insco's reduction in rate base. And so the revenue requirement in turn would adjust downward with that, as I mentioned previously. So to answer your question, the schedules and filing that was made on Friday, September 10th.
Thank you very much. That is your final and your complete position, number-wise.
Other than the fact I know that we have left open the idea of rate case expense to gather expenses that are incurred as the hearing goes on for our consultants and such. So that is the one moving item that I'm aware of.
Yes, thank you. I think you clarified this in your final set of exhibits, but you'll just forgive me. I'm interested in the airplane lease and charter flight expense. You did not include this in your original accounting papers, I don't believe. Is that correct?
Could you clarify original accounting papers?
So when you filed when the case was originally filed, you included, I think I said did not include, you included an amount for airplane lease and charter flights.
Correct.
And in that same filing, you included an amount for SERP. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes. So if I were to look now at your final position, am I correct that that there is no, you are not charging, for just want of a better word, ratepayers, you're not including in there an amount for airplane lease and charter flights or an amount for SERP?
That's correct. In my rebuttal testimony, those adjustments were made, and the accompanying work papers included the amounts, but they were aggregated on a particular line and weren't showing individually. And so the filing that was made on September 10th also tried to clarify visually that those costs for the airplane and the SERP were removed, indeed.
And would I find that on sheet 7 of 21?
Yes, you would, specifically line 10 for SERP and line 11 for the airplane.
Thank you. I'd like to just ask you a little bit about the regulatory asset. I think you used the word defer. Is that the same as put into a regulatory asset?
Yeah, that's maybe a looser definition than should be used, but the idea is to take those expenses, defer them to a future time by hanging them up on the balance sheet as a regulatory asset for future consideration by the PSC.
So the amount is, I think it's $70,000 a year for a certain number of years. If you defer this amount, what amount would show up in your accounting papers or on your books?
To the extent, hypothetically, if the company spent $70,000 on this program, the maximum allowable operating pressure reconfirmation program, that amount, rather than being expensed on the income statement for that particular year, would be moved to the balance sheet as a regulatory asset. And so it would be on the balance sheet and for consideration in a future rate case.
So, so are you not, is it not your intent to include, let's say there were 4 years in this program, is it not your intent to include all 4 years in the regulatory asset, but to include those expenses year by year?
I think that the way I would propose is that as the expenses are incurred throughout the next 4 years in your example, the first $70,000 of expenses per year would be deferred into the regulatory asset. And so they would be accumulating there until their next rate case. And if there was a rate case prior to the end of the 4th year, I assume we would look to make an adjustment to say we'd like to include an amortization of the balance that was on the books as of the end of the test year.
So would the balance in year 1 be 70,000 or more than 70,000, or I suppose it could be less than 70,000?
I think the maximum it would be is 70,000. So the idea is 70,000, up to $70,000 per year. So to the extent if year 1 we spent 60,000 on this program, that would be deferred. And if it was in excess of 70,000, if we spent 80,000, the thought would be 70,000 would be deferred and 80,000 or the remainder would fall through to expense.
So it would not be the total amount for the program, it would be a year by year deferral.
Correct.
Would the amount that goes into the regulatory asset earn a rate of return?
My understanding is that it would, until such time as the costs were fully amortized.
And so if it were a 4-year program, that would probably be 4 years. Could be a little more, I suppose it could be a little less.
If I may need you to restate your last thought.
I can't remember exactly how many years your program was. I think it was 4 years. But let's assume, just for the sake of the question, that you are proposing a 4-year program and you'd like to place, you'd like to defer those monies to a regulatory asset. And well, let's do it a little differently. So at the end of year 1, if you had a rate case, would you empty out the regulatory asset or would you keep the money in there?
Well, my thought as I sit here today is that we would look at the balance in the regulatory asset as of the test year end and include an adjustment to note that we'd like to start amortizing that amount to expense, include that recovery in base rates in our proposal. And then to the extent that was approved, that would start to draw down that account.
So then if I understand what you're saying that in year 1, there would be no money to ratepayers, but in year 2, there would be the money you spent in year 1 plus rate of return.
I think that as the spend occurs, we would start deferring that, and we would look, to your point, in the first rate case, year 1, to include an amortization of that deferred amount in rates. And so there would be a lag to the customers, as whenever those rates from the next rate case went into effect would be the start of the time it would affect their bills.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Racher. I have no more questions.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, just very short redirect, and hopefully I can help clear a little bit up about the deferral. Mr. Racher, what we are asking for is in this case, can you tell us what we're asking for with regard to the deferral? You know, what the actual mechanism for it, or to recover costs?
Sure. The idea behind the proposal is with this particular program, which is, as noted in Mr. Anstead's testimony, to increase safety for our system and therefore the public and our customers, is that as we work through this program and spend dollars, that up to $70,000 be deferred each year as this program goes through its cycle. And to the extent that that amount would then be deferred in a regulatory asset for potential recovery in a future case, where the commission and other parties would have the ability to assess the prudency and the reasonableness and the recovery of the costs.
Thank you, Mr. Racher.
You're welcome.
I don't have any questions for Mr. Racher at this time, so I appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And Ms. Moore, do you have your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the company would call Ms. Kimberly Cartella to the stand.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cartella. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. If you could just spell and say your name for the record.
Okay, it's Kimberly, Kimberly, and I go by Kimberly, by the way. And last name Cartella, Cartella.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Cartella.
Good afternoon.
For the record, can you please state your employer and your title?
Yes, I'm employed by NiSource Corporate Service Company, and my title is Director Compensation.
Thank you. Do you have before you the direct testimony of Mel Kasanovich, as well as attachments MK1A and MK1B, and also the rebuttal testimony of Mr. Kasanovich?
Yes.
Ms. Cartella, have you had a thorough review of the testimonies and attachments of Mr. Kasanovich?
Yes.
And can you tell us if this testimony and the attachments were prepared under your supervision, or if you had a hand in helping prepare them?
Yes, I had a hand in helping prepare these with Mel Kasanovich.
Thank you. And at this time, do you have any changes, corrections, or updates?
I do not.
Okay. So is the testimony true and accurate to the best of your information, knowledge, and belief?
Yes.
And if you were giving the same testimony that we have from Mr. Kasanovich in direct and rebuttal, if you were giving that testimony today, would it be the same as when he originally filed it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the testimony and attachments of Mr. Kasanovich being formally adopted by Ms. Cartella, and specifically it's the direct testimony of Mr. Kasanovich with attachments MK1A, MK1B, and the rebuttal testimony of Mr. Kasanovich be marked as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 11.
So marked.
And Your Honor, if there are no objections, I would ask that Columbia Hearing Exhibit 11 be admitted into the record.
OPC, is there any objection to the admission of Exhibit 11?
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
Staff?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. The testimony and attached exhibits will be entered as Columbia Hearing Exhibit 11.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have no live rejoinder for Ms. Cartella, and now she is available for cross-examination and/or questions from Your Honor.
Thank you. OPC, do you have cross-examination for Ms. Cartella?
Yes, Your Honor, just a very brief clarifying question. Ms. Cartella, could you take a look at what was marked as OPC Exhibit 15? Has your counsel provided you with that?
OPC Exhibit 15. Was this one of the responses to a data request, or is this separate?
Yes, I can give more info. It's the company's response to staff data request 3-009.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes, I have that in front of me.
Okay, thank you. And this data response was initially sponsored by Mr. Kasanovich, but with you standing in his place, I've been instructed by your counsel to ask you my clarifying question on this response.
Sure.
Thank you. This question asks about the total incentive compensation expense amounts of incentives separated into achieving the company's operational and financial goals for CMD and for NCSC. The first paragraph provides that breakdown between those two categories of goals for 2020 and 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second paragraph discusses STI, short-term incentive compensation. The last paragraph provides the percentages for costs achieving financial goals for years 2018 to 2021. And the last paragraph specifies that those percentages are applicable to long-term incentive compensation. Do you see that?
Yes.
So my question, just to clarify for the record, going back to the first paragraph, those percentages there, those are for short-term incentive compensation, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, Ms. Cartella. No further questions of the witness, Your Honor. OPC would move for entry of admission of OPC Exhibit 15 into the evidentiary record.
Any objection to admitting it as OPC Exhibit 15?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
Okay, so admitted.
Thank you.
Staff, do you have any questions?
I do, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Cartella.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Kasanovich's, and therefore your testimony deals with incentive compensation in that term, long-term and short-term. What does incentive stand for in that phrase?
Incentive compensation stands for, we have incentive programs that are designed to establish goals and objectives for our employees to achieve. And by those employees achieving those certain goals and objectives, and a compensation, I'm not wording that very well, an incentive award is provided to employees.
So this is a compensation or some other form of
Compensation.
award to your employees, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you said it takes a form of compensation that's increased pay, correct?
No, so incentive compensation is a part of our total rewards program, and incentive compensation specifically, as written in this testimony, refers to, as you said, short-term and long-term incentive compensation. Those are to incentive compensation reward programs that we have for our employees. And if predetermined goals and objectives are met, then an incentive award is provided to our employees. It's not an increase to their base compensation. It's an incentive award provided to the employees.
Is it a financial reward?
Yes, it's I should have clarified that by saying it's a cash incentive award.
Okay.
The short-term incentive plan is a cash incentive award.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
Any redirect?
Yes, just one short question for Ms. Cartella. Ms. Cartella, if you could take a look back at OPC Exhibit 15, which is the company's response to Staff 3009. Just want to clear up a little bit of math there. The first sentence of our response, it says for 2020, the portion of expense related to operational goals is 16% and the financial goals is 85%. I think that equals something over 100. What are the numbers, or could you clarify what those numbers should be for us?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yes, that should, the 16% is correct. Where it says in financial goals is 85%, that should have said 84%.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Ms. Moore?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. I do not have any questions of Ms. Cartella either. Thank you, Ms. Cartella.
Thank you.
And according to the order of witnesses that was submitted by the parties, that would be the last witness for today. Unless there is any change to that. Was does Counsel for Columbia want to go forward with anybody else today, or are we going to stick to the order that was submitted previously? Your witnesses are available tomorrow to continue?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness order, those witnesses are not available today, and they're scheduled for tomorrow. So we would like to continue with that schedule if it's okay with Your Honor.
That would be fine. Are there any other matters that we need to deal with today? I'll send out a new invitation to continue the hearing tomorrow via WebEx. And we can start tomorrow at 10 a.m. Are there any other matters that we need to address today?
And staff has nothing, Your Honor.
No, nothing for OPC, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And we will continue the hearing tomorrow at 10 a.m. And we can go off the record. Thank you, Doug.
Off the record, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.